Hello everybody and welcome to another On the Workbench session. This is number 11. And this is something that I wanted to show you guys. It's the same thing as before where we're trying to do real world stuff. These are part of a commission thing here. A bunch of these, I'm pretty sure they're from, not Mantic, what's the other one? Malifaux, that's it. Pretty sure, just judging by the amount of pieces that these came in, I'm just going to say they're probably Malifaux figures. And here's some of the ones that we had painted before, and you can see the pictures of them off in the corners. We got 4 of these guys here. They're in, I think it's 3 different poses. Yeah, 6 of them, 2 different poses of each. And the idea is I'm going to try out the contrast paints just like I did on the ones that you see painted. This is a twist because I didn't have this before. This is actually loaned to us by the really nice guy at the drugstore where we drop off all of our stuff to ship out. So that's really cool. And he also, I think, yeah, this is one, this Wildwood here, because everybody's talking about this. Essentially, it's sort of the new Devlin Mud. It's, well, the new Liquid Talent, as they call it. And, well, there was this one too, this Gore Grunta. So those were the 3 that he loaned us to use for a little while, at least before we could maybe get some. But just like I did with the live sessions on the Lannister crossbowmen, I went back in with opaque paints here. I think I even used some Reaper paints, but again, some of you folks can't get the Reaper paints very easily. So I will, as much as possible, just stick with these to see what we can do. The idea is to get each of these in a slightly different color, so you can see as we compare these more directly. The one has a little bit of a bluish theme, a dark sort of a spine / mane. This one here a little bit lighter. The ground is all the same, and that's stuff that I've had to match 1,000 times. We got the usual stuff here, the number 8 round craft brushes, the makeup sponges. We're going to use these a little bit differently than we do, say, with the liner paints. We're also going to probably do a little bit of mixing, a la these 2 together to make some nifty browns, and then throwing in the Leviathan blue to get some really, really dark. So we'll go with that. Maybe we throw in the liner paints here and there. Yeah, I'll try and use as many of these as I can. We'll also use the wet palette. Not so much that I want to keep these wet, but it does help to arrange them in a way that you can see. Now, there's going to be a little bit of sound here as I open up my Chinese food container here. Here, let's pop this open. Now, so far, I don't think, yeah, here we go. So you can see that has actually kept these. They're a little bit thick, I have to say that. Here, let's get some of these out of the way. Let's throw this in here. Get it where you can see it. And I'm just going to go ahead, because this is the same palette that I was using on these ones that I was painting. Because again, with the idea of this is real world situation. When you see pretty much the way this stuff happens on a daily basis. I'm going to try and do these as often as I can, and they're pretty much for you guys, because I think you'll be the ones that benefit from it the most, because you kind of understand what the deal is. So yeah, these are still pretty viable here, so that's good. One thing I will say that I've noticed about the contrast stuff, your water, normally I can mix or clean my brush a lot of times in the water before it really starts getting, well, that dark. It's almost instantly dark because of the pigmentation. Now, I think some of you that saw the live sessions, you saw that I use these little pipettes here to basically, get some of this stuff out on the palette or into these little containers here. It just makes it a little bit easier, a little less messy. And one thing I did notice though is that the paint kind of stays wet in there for a while too. Shocked. That's why you get a whole bunch of them, and I basically have one of these for each paint. I think at some point I'll even just maybe mark these to say what color kind of goes with which one, because they never seem. Look at that. That was, I think it was probably a couple of days ago that I was probably messing with that. So what we'll do is we'll come back here and we'll just start to put, first we'll do stuff on the base, and then we're going to work on these guys, and we're also going to use the contrast medium, as they call it. So we'll be right back. So I'm going to get started with the bases here. And one thing I will do, at least just for this first part here, I might actually throw another piece of palette paper out here. So I think you can just about see that. And I'm going to throw this over here. So what I'm going to do is actually take some Space Wolves Gray over here. Pile of that. I'm going to take some of that Wildwood. We'll have those two mixed together. And now we're going to start it on our rocks. Now here, I'm not really going to fool around with that medium, because basically what that's designed to do, it's like putting water in there. You put water in what? The liner paints, right? We put water in there, it thins it down. They're not as dark. Well, water can do some odd things with it. I've used water to thin it, but the medium really does seem to have it's almost like using, with the oils, that higher quality mineral spirits. No, white spirits, not mineral spirits. So there's the rock part of it. Now using the Space Wolves Gray, so I can even throw a little bit more in there. It's going to give it more of a bluish look. But this is where I'm going to utilize the sponge and just take it away this way instead of using the medium to lighten that. On the boar, that's on the other ones, I had some interesting success actually just taking the medium and using that to thin it down instead of wiping things away. So now this is the darker blue. This is even more of the wildwood right here. I'm actually going to take a touch of that's the Flesh Tearers red over there. And this is just the super, super dark brown right here. Oh, if you're wondering what the primer is, it's essentially the gray Badger Steiner res. That was the start of it. Then I used that sort of light tan primer. And then after that, another shot of white. So it gives it that, whatever, the bone white that you're supposed to use with the official GW primer, which is just way overcosted, and spray cans are just insane to use anyway. I'd rather just use Badger primer and brush it on. That's when we just stopped using the primer stuff altogether, the primer cans, because it was nuts. So that was a little bit of the Blood Angels red. I actually have to get out some more of the Yield Snakebite leather here, and I'm just gonna, to save some time, just try and brush some in here. Now you can really see just how much these number 8 round craft brushes hold, because what I'm looking to do is paint Mr. Log over here, and now we're gonna get somewhat darker but also somewhat more green. I'm even gonna take a touch of that Space Wolves Gray, because you don't want that wood to be just bright brown. It's supposed to be a fallen log after all, not freshly cut, and they're not going to IKEA to find some nice polished pine or something. Alright, so let's just hit the rest of that log. And there's something, and this is something I did here. So I'm going to take some of that medium, and I'm actually just going to do that with it. So this is something I found you could do. Yeah, check that out. Now we're going to take some of the stuff out of the brush. They just basically dried the brush off, and I took some of that away. Now I've got that brush. It's sort of a chisel edge here. And I can do something like that. See, take the paint away, or just use my hand. So, like I said, we'll move from base to base here. And there's also nothing that says, oh, I can put another layer here. Say if I want that to be a little darker. So that is something I'm going to experiment with more. I've got a whole bunch of different things lined up. Again, this is not... I think people have already been asking me, oh man, is this taking the place of your liner paints? And no. This is just for those who have a really tough time getting those. This is just doing things in the same manner, but just with a different material. That's all it is. We're not really changing anything. We may have to change a few things around the edges just to make it work completely. So this is, again, the Space Wolves Gray. and the wildwood, not completely mixing them together because I want that little bit of marbleization that happens. And I'm just going to plow right through this. Plow right through this. And as always with these, there's stuff that I'm going to have to do off camera because there's things I cannot see. All that stuff underneath the bore itself, well, you wouldn't even want to watch me trying to get to that stuff. I mean, what do you care about the underside of the bore? Is it really that important when you could really be something more interesting? If I could spend 20 minutes less showing you that and showing you the foliage stuff instead, something tells me that that has way more value for you than me painting the very dark underside of a boar. I think you got that handled. In fact, I'm sure you do. Don't need me to show you that. Well, that is if you ever do paint what I believe are Malifaux boars. So, sponge, again, bang. Not really getting too involved in the base because it's going to get covered up by a lot of greenery. So here is, again, Space was gray. That's got a little bit of that Leviathan blue. And look at how instantly it just makes that darker. So these are the things that I've been playing around with here just to see what happens. So there's number 2. Let's hit our third one here doing the same thing. This has actually a little bit more of the Space Wolves gray. This one, I have to say, of all of the ones that I've got, this one acts differently. And this is something that I have seen on other videos where people try out the lighter colors act differently. Now, the liner paints, they are far more consistent from one to the next. Whether you're using red, green, blue, gray, sepia, whatever it is, you're pretty much going to get the same result. So that's why I can't just say, well, yeah, this is the perfect 100% solution to not being able to get the Reaper liners. Well, not really, because it ain't the same thing. It doesn't do the same thing. It acts a little bit different, and that's why I think I prefer the darker contrast paints, and from everything that I've seen, that is, I mean, well, you're not going to get unanimous anything, but if you're looking at anything that's close to somewhat unanimous with these things, people tend to like the darker ones more. And because, now maybe it was a happy accident, but I don't know, something told me to just not deal with the lighter ones, because I figured if they're darker, I can thin them down, just like we do with our liner paints, right? So why bother? Get lighter ones for that. And look at what I just did there. So this is also probably not something that GW anticipated people doing is, well, yeah, we can instantly make things lighter just by doing that. And we can save ourselves painting several layers of the stuff. Now, for those of you that didn't see my live sessions, I do suggest you go watch those, because that was the very first time I opened the darn jars. I've had a few more sessions with him since now, both stuff that I've shot on video and stuff that I haven't. So I think that's something you might want to check out. They're on the longish side. They're about 3 hours a piece. And yeah, 2 hours and 50 minutes a piece, something along those lines. But it was definitely worth it, because I really got a chance to rigorously test those. And especially, here we go. This one, these guys here, this was a really interesting session with them where I was doing the non-metallic metal. And there's certainly going to be a whole bunch more of that coming up. Oh, yeah. Without a doubt, we'll definitely be doing more of that. So I'm just going heavy on the wildwood here. It's an interesting expression. Just to get the bottom of this base going here. It's, again, nothing a big deal. Now, so for people that are saying, well, okay, I only have the liners, I don't have those, what would you be doing with the liners? Gray liner, brown liner. If I wanted to get more of a bluish gray, well, I could do the blue liner, mix it with the brown. It'll be dark, but then when I do this, and you can see how there's different colors in here. Look at that. There's some bluish. There's almost a little bit of tan. That's that snakebite leather, say over here. But over here, it's got more of a bluish look to it. So again, this is one way. This is exactly what we would do with the liner paints. And we would be left behind with that sort of leftover coloration and tinting, right? And the more of this I take away, the lighter it gets. Bark, these are also heavily textured, both the figures and the bases, really heavily textured. That is another thing you hear about the contrast paints, is that they do better on heavily textured surfaces. Makes sense, because they're designed to sink down into crevices and all that sort of stuff. Well, there's no crevices for them to sink down into. They kind of just pool on the surface. Now here is where we're going to throw in a second layer. Now I'm also going to go in with the medium here. Now you're noticing that I was not taking that off the palette, or taking it to the palette somewhere else and mixing it together. I did that a bunch on those other ones. I wanted to see what happens when I do this. So you're seeing something new here. Now this is the thing that I'm really starting to notice. And for the people that say it's not going to work on vehicles, well, this is a relatively smooth surface, right? Now look what I'm doing here. See how I'm just taking this and stretching that along and pushing it around? But this is something that we've done with the, look at this. I'm actually painting in some tree bark texture. That's just the liner paint. Remember, but see, I got my filbert brush going on here. Look at this. Look at that. Yeah. See, that's pretty nifty. I don't hate that. That's pretty cool. So that's a little bit different. Now, I could do the same thing. Same thing with the liner paint. Sorry, the voice is kind of wonky here. Not quite sure why. I don't know, maybe because it was practically in the 40s here today. Yes, it's mid-June, and at the baseball game yesterday, you could see the breath of everybody in the stadium. Because that's how we do things here. Alright, so that's pretty nifty. That's a neat little fun experiment right there. Let's see what happens with Mr. Boar. And I'm going to go... What the heck? We're going to take this wildwood, because I put a whole bunch of it out there, right? And I'm going to go something along these lines, like so. Something like that. And I'm sure this just horrifies Games Workshop, what I just did right here. I just took some of that medium, and I started to pull that down. I had it sitting up there, and I just pulled some of it down. See, I'm just grabbing a little dot of that medium. Well, what's the equivalent is? Imagine I had a big old thing of liner paint sitting up there, right? And then I just took water and then started to pull it down. Because see how it's starting to get lighter here? Look at that. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that... And it's not meant as a big knock against GW, whatever. Maybe they just didn't have the capacity to show stuff like this. But this is just not what they're showing. How hard is it to show people this? It ain't. So you are going to, for those of you that aren't used to the army painting stuff, army painting videos get conversational. Call it that. That's just kind of how it is. Now this time I did actually mix it together, the wildwood with the contrast, but now I'm going to do something a little bit different. So I'm looking for, I think that is the Fire Slayer flesh chunk, because this is a little more orangey. Yeah, and yes, that is a word. It is officially a color. I have declared it to be. And this is my own world of painting madness. So I get to make all the rules. Just took that medium, whatever the heck that is again. Like so, like you do. Yeah, check that out. That's kind of neat, right? That doesn't stink. It's something I could easily do with the, oh gosh, what the heck are that? The intensity inks from Green Stuff World. I could have done the same darn thing. Only there I could just use water instead of the stupid medium. These contrast paints, they're interesting. They do some neat things. They also cost 3 times what the liner paints do. Because well, maybe not 3 times, 2.5 times. Because I'm assuming that the liner paints are in the neighborhood of 350-ish, 360-ish a jar. And the contrast paints were $8 a jar. Now, let me see what the size is here. What are we looking at here? It should be 17. Oh, good grief, half an ounce. I'm just going to look at the. Here we go. 17 milliliters here, or is it 12? 17 milliliters there. What's in here? Now, this is in ounces. It's going to get thrown across the room. Okay, it's in both 18 milliliters. Okay, here we go. So these two are virtually the same size, and I'm fairly certain the intensity inks are not $7 a jar or $8 a jar. So that's something to consider. Now, I was able to mitigate that initial, oh my gosh, reaction. Now, I just took some of the dark blue and mixed it with the brown, just so you know. I just got, 10 of them? I didn't get the medium. I didn't even know there was such a thing. So, didn't even know to get that. I don't think I even saw it. So, see, I'm just getting the feet here a little bit darker as it goes down. So, we went darker to lighter to darker. And I'm just going to leave the mouth for later. But I am going to hit the nose here, make the snoots darker. That's something I have been kind of doing on each one. Yes, I know they're snouts, but we always call them snoots here. A nose is a snoot. Now, we want to do different colors. We are dipping into that. And I'm really tempted to call it the Reichland Flesh shade, even though it is not. So I am going to do, actually, I think you can't, yeah, see my brushes underneath the palette there? Well, I got a little bit of the snakebite leather. We got a big old bunch of the medium and another big old bunch of the medium because we're going opposite. We're going light here. And then we're going to make it darker as it goes down and try to shift the color. So see how much lighter that is? That's because we got this medium in there. And by golly, I am sure that GW does not want you to do what I'm doing right here. But they don't get to say nothing here, because this is my paint world. Now, what do we want to do? What do we want to do? I am going to, let's see, that's a snakebite leather. I'm looking for, here it is. So this is the Gore Grunta fur. I'm going to try and just throw a little bit of this out here, because it is definitely an very orangey red. But we're going to take a touch of that wildwood, throw it in there, and look at how much darker this is going to be. Now, I do apologize for the shine here. I'm just going to point this light in a little different direction. Because, well, it's almost a little bit like the oil paints, I suppose. So I do apologize for whatever shine is bouncing off of this, but, well, not only is it a wash, but it's also a wash that's designed to take a while to dry. But you see how I'm working this here? From the top down. And as I go further down, things keep getting a little bit darker. Now it's a little more of the wildwood as opposed to that was that other flesh color there, whatever that one was, the Gore Grunta fur, sorry. Gorgruntifer. It will take me forever to get these names. That's just how it's going to be. Because, well, my only connection with anything GW over the last several years was Lord of the Rings. The last fantasy GW game I played was Warhammer Fantasy. And last time I played 40k regularly was 4th edition. I played in a 5th edition tournament and a 6th edition tournament, and that was that was the end. Well, they also wiped out all my armies. And the same thing happened, well, much worse in fantasy. They wiped out everything there. So that is why the only thing I stuck with after that was Lord of the Rings. Because they can't really do they can't blow up the world there. It's actually why I started playing historical games. Because, well, the fluff kind of doesn't change. And yes, this is just for those of you that haven't seen the army painting videos yet. I don't know, you get bonus coverage, you get commentary on the state of, well, miniatures and gaming. How's that? See it? Look at how different that is right there. So we got two very different looking little dudes right here. Now let's see if we can't find a third difference. Now, I don't want to necessarily get completely into, say, an albino one or something along those lines. These have to look a little bit more alike. Somewhere in the same family. Let's try something real crazy here. So this is going to be the Blood Angels. Green. Here, Blood Angels green. That was Kathy and I joking about that earlier. So maybe I should not joke. I'm going to take some of this. This is the Warp Lightning. Yeah, Warp Lightning green. And we're going to try and make ourselves a brown here. I'm sorry, folks. My voice is different. I don't know. Something's going on here. So I'm going to take a touch of that. We're going to mix these two together. And we're going to make our own really deep shade of brown. What's going to happen is that is going to separate as we put it on this guy slightly. Oh, that's a nifty greenish brown. I'm sure they made some kind of Nurgle-ish type dark brown color or dark greenish brown like this. But instead of spending the $8, so that would have been $24, we just said, we're good with the 16 that we spent. We're going to make our own. And that's what we just did. And we're going to go back to that medium right there. Like so. Like that. And right here. So this is again going to give that, it's going to lighten that up as we move down. And if I wanted to, I could even exercise a little more, taking it away with the brush, right, like I did on the base. I might even, what the heck? What do we got to lose? It's just a commission piece. So what we are going to do is we're going to do something like this here. We're just taking some away, not using the sponge. We're effectively sponging some of it away, but using a little gentler method here because it's also moving it around. The other thing is that I was trying to contemplate with this. Now I'm taking some of the wildwood, mixing that in with that. For the folks that want to do oils, but they're either just too scared or they feel like there's kids around, they're scared of fumes, or which there are none. If you get a decent paint and a decent white spirits, you don't have to worry about that. But for those worried about it, sorry, I was trying to come up with, is there a way to play with this stuff in the same way that you might play with the oils? So that's the other thing I'm trying to do here, is come up with some kind of, maybe a substitute for oils, or maybe something that does all three. It's a substitute for the liner paints, it's a substitute for the oils for the folks that just think they can't work with it, that it's just going to be, they're just too afraid of it. So now again, we're going with that medium to lighten things up because we're just trying to make maybe a slightly lighter bottom of the body. Now, this is not the be-all and end-all here. We are going to change that when we go over the top of it with the regular paints. As I do want to have the hooves be darker. And again, I'm just trying to shoot what I can down into the crevices there. All right, let's do ombre number 3. And then what we'll do is we'll stop here. We'll let this stuff dry. It does take a little bit to dry. Hence the whole wondering, could this be a substitute for oils kind of thing. Now this has that fleshed here red with the wildwood. So we're looking to make and a little bit of that Linden blue. We're back to that fleshed here red. So we're trying to get a super, super, super dark red here. And I mean really dark. Yeah, that's going to be nice and dark. Like you do. And we will also do our little trick with the medium there. Alright, okay, yeah. So this is, I think it's just called contrast medium, if I remember right. Okay, so we got this. And what I wanted to do is actually grab some of this. How much is left of this Space Wolves gray? I think there's enough to work with here. And we're just going to do the bottom of this guy right here with the Space Wolves gray while we take that dark red mix that we did and let that carry down into it. Here, it's going to... There we go. I think this won't be too shocking for some folks that are used to me kind of slapping paint all over the place, right? That was the other reason why I thought we could adjust or adapt the stuff that we normally do and bring these into the fold because, well, think of how messy the first stages are. Think of just how they almost make the first stages of the typical contrast paint video you see look positively neat by comparison. The kind of seemingly non-control we exercise over paint when we're doing the usual liners and all those initial glazes and just honking paint all over the place. Seemingly, but we're actually not. That's the nifty thing. So again, this is another really dark red here. I mean, that is massively dark red. It doesn't even look red. Like that. And actually, I am just going to shove that right down into the mouth there because it's just, there's no way I'm going to, yeah, I'm just going to shove that right down in there right now. What the heck? Who cares? Alright, so there's our 4 different colors right there. So what we're going to do is, we don't have to let these dry completely. But I think next thing what we're going to do is, we will mess with the bases here, and that's where we're working a little bit with the semi-opaques. And depending on that, we'll get into the tusks here too. So next up, we're going to mix opaque light paints with the contrast stuff here. And then we'll go in, as this dries, the same thing into the fur, into the tusks, and the other areas. So we'll be right back with that. Alright, so these are the first 2 of the opaques that I'm going to throw out here. Nothing complicated. And if I was doing this with the Reaper stuff, I would just throw out the Maiden Flesh and the Maggot White. It's nothing terribly spectacular. So here's, was that Xandri Dust, something like that. And what I'm looking to do is find something that has some blue in it. So I'm actually going to move some of these things out of the way because we got some blue over here. And that's probably that what's that one green color here? I'm going to see if I can't. Yep, it's the Archelian green, or Achelian green. There's no R, whatever. Like I said, guys, if you're looking for super precise pronunciations on this stuff, well, you might be a little bit disappointed because it just don't matter that much to me. So see what I just did there? Just did a little semi-opaque right over the top of that. And I'm gonna do that on the tusks here too, because in some of these tusk things, some of the other, just to try and get colors in there, I had to hit the tusks. So again, that's sort of a semi-opaque thing that we're doing right there. And let's see what happens on the base. See what I'm doing here? Just in a couple of these areas. And if there's too much, see, I can just take some off. Now let's get something that's a little bit lighter and even a little bit more towards the blue. So I just took some of that Screaming Skull, mixed it with that Liandon blue, and see, now it's even a little bit lighter. It's a little bit more towards the bluish side. So you see how we're starting to get some more contrast in here. But the idea is that it's semi-opaque. And as I learned, you can do the exact same thing with those Green Stuff World Intensity inks. I've already done at least one episode with those. I'll be doing some more. Now, the one caveat I have to say, and this is for all the snow effects that you see me do. Now, I found this out the hard way, that the intensity inks, for whatever reason, when they interact with that snow medium and stuff, it sort of reactivates, and your snow becomes whatever color your intensity ink was. So if that is not good, then that's something you want to keep in mind. So see, we can see the difference right here. So let's get in here now. Like this. I'm using that same color. So again, this is just like we do all the time with, say, the liner paints. And we're doing this sort of semi-opaque. It's not a dry brush whatsoever. This brush has a whole bunch of nice liquidy stuff going on in it. Again, another expression that I am going to officially use as my own. And I'm just gonna, again, hit those tusks where they might, yeah, some of these got a little bit of the, I don't know, wash, whatever the heck it's called, contrast paint over it. I don't really care. Now, oh gosh, what is it that they've got? They've got a couple of these. They have the primer colors, but then they also apparently have paint colors that are the same as the primers. Well, guess what? They already kind of have paint colors that are like the primers. You don't have to go out and get those too. And you probably have those sitting around. Oh, and by the way, you could probably mix your own real easy. I mean, you know, this is the mixing channel. This is where we mix things. That's just kind of how it is. We don't like to spend lots of extra money on things that are just replicating what we already have or what we could easily make on our own. Sometimes things you just can't make easily on your own. And that's okay. You know, you get the tools that you need. No, I'm not barking at people here for getting these things. If this is, you can't get the liners and this is kind of what you can get, well then, I mean, so you kind of necessarily don't really have a choice, because I actually, the Vallejo, oh gosh, I remember what they're called. I used to have a bunch of them. They're actually in the old painting pyramid videos, and I'm sure you've seen them there. Well, they're very similar to these two. I used them to keep the paint from drying sooner, and I mixed them together with those to make these semi-translucent colors, these lighter semi-translucent colors like I'm using right now. I think it was the Pleasure Demon, the Ultra Forge Pleasure Demon that I posted last it was in kind of early June, or first part of June there. Now that one is one of the older ones, so that probably had me using Secret Weapon, washes, and those Vallejo wash glaze, whatever they were called at the time. They still make them, to make something like this. So look at the difference here. And There's nothing wrong with that shading there. That's kind of nice. But look at how much more depth there is into this. We got some blues in there now, just some really fun different colors. And all we did was we mixed that Screaming Skull with that Liandon blue, that darker blue. So it can be just as simple as this. And for those who maybe haven't seen, I don't know how it could have been, you could have missed it, but this is the bark and branch method of basing. At least, oh my gosh, half of the army painting series, if not more, are based on this type of base. So you folks have seen that a lot, to the point where I've almost, well, I can't dispense with showing that same basing method over and over again, because maybe people won't watch all of the same army painting episodes that you have. But I love it. I just absolutely love it. Now here I switched this out a little bit. That's a little bit of the wildwood mixed with the Screaming Skull, which I'm sure is just their bone white or whatever the heck it used to be called. Now again, I want to get a little bit more of that, a little lighter here, but I want to make sure I got some of that blue, and hopefully that's enough on the palette. Like I said, this is a workbench episode, so the balance of preferences actually shifts more towards me getting the job done than me trying to show every last thing. But I thought that is where it has a benefit unto its own, that you're seeing kind of the real world. Because I'll tell you what, and I'm sure I said this on every other workbench session, never does it happen that I'm just working on one little army thing or just this. There's at least 120 to 160 other figures that I am working on. Oh, actually more than that, probably closer to 200, of various types and sizes, monsters, vehicles, you name it. It's all being worked on at once. And that's just the reality. That's how it is. And I guess if anybody's curious, it seems like a lot of you guys use those wet palettes. Well, this is another long-term experiment, because, of course, what was the first thing I heard? And this is hilarious. Well, you can't use these with a wet palette. You can't do that. No, you can't use those with a wet palette. Well, this is coming from the guy who never used a wet palette before until just a few weeks ago, just because he had to. Said, yeah, you can use a wet palette with them. I'm doing it right now. I think I've painted 30 miniatures so far with these contrast paints using a wet palette. And as you can see, the wet palette, not only does it keep the contrast paints going, it keeps your other paints going. I'm actually going to throw a little bit of that medium in there. Oh gosh, what was it called? That flow improver. Again, those of you that have seen the older painting pyramid videos, that I used to use, I think it was Reaper flow improver. It's essentially whatever the heck this stuff is. And you can bet that I am going to try and use other flow improvers or mediums that I already got to see if they make a decent substitute for that stuff. Clearly the stuff is okay, it works, but if something else is going to do the same thing, and it happens to be easier for me to get, because for me, Reaper paints and all that sort of stuff, those are actually easier to get by a lot in Secret Weapon. Heck, even the green stuff world is easier to get. Alright, now I'm going to do a little twist on this here. Oh, what do we got here? Okay, that's a nice little brown. This is actually thin with water because I want to see what happens. Yeah, see? It works. You can thin it with water when you really just don't care what kind of a texture you're going to get. Because it's a base. It's a rocky base. Why would I really care all that much I'm just looking to get, and it doesn't let it be quite as dark either. So obviously, so that's pretty neat. Oh, here's my, I think it's my wildwood off to the side there. Okay. Now let's get in here and just slap something over these stupid tusks here just to get them back to a more uniform type of color that we want. Again, I hope you guys can see this because I just have to kind of keep plowing through these. I mean, in effect, it's almost more like a live session where the camera actually does turn off once in a while. Alright, so is that all? That's just about all 4. Looks that way. Alright. And what the heck, I'm just gonna do a little test play right here. So that is the, I think that's the Xandri dust. And I think you can see what's happening now. We're just going in here. We're going to start to lighten some of this stuff up. You can go back and forth with no problems. And you just saw, like I was doing on the base, where it was getting lighter, lighter, lighter. And I said, nah, you know what? I actually have to go back, do some kind of glaze down in the darker areas. So again, here all I'm trying to do is play around here, see. I'm just kind of moving some color around, seeing like, okay, what do I want to have a little bit lighter, where is something a little uneven? Because just like we do with those initial washes of liner paint where we remove 2/3 of it or half of it or even 3/4 of it with the sponge, they're just there to kind of serve as a marking point, and then we work from there. Well, we substituted these contrast things here for the liner paints, so we have used these to do the same kind of function. Now, where are you at? I'm looking for this one here, because this was originally that was all brown. There was no hint of blue whatsoever. That's something I added later. That was that, I'm just going to keep calling it skull white, screaming skull, whatever the heck it is. It was basically something like this. See, it was kind of just a lighter bluish gray color, whatever. And, let's play with that here. I'm going to take a touch of that right there. And we are going to see just how. Alright, see? Look at that. We just kind of almost matched the color that was sitting there, but see how it's a little more opaque? It's just slightly more opaque. So I'm sorry, it lightens things up a little bit, but not too much. Check that out. So here you can see it just stuff, there's a little bit too harsh of a transition. And this is actually really watery. I mean, this is like very watery. And it's still, see, look at how it just still covers over the top just enough to give us that hint. Gives us that little hint of coverage there. All right. There we are. Working my way down through the legs, because the idea is this one maybe has just a lighter, kind of that light chest color, whereas the other ones, it's more the reverse. And I'm actually taking some parts of that contrast paint that pooled in a few spots and moving it around. So I just went a little bit lighter here. And I think you can see where this is going. This is not nuclear physics right here. It does not have to be that complicated. And you can see we're just now, you could use a smaller brush if you wanted. But I think you know that whenever possible, I'm going to use my big old number 8 round craft brushes. So see, working that lighter, working that lighter. Now, I didn't necessarily intend when I was first starting to put the colors on here for this part of it to get to this level of lightness. But it's kind of neat. It's different because I've got half a dozen of these things. There's eventually you start to run out of ways to maybe make them a little bit different from each other. And I thought this is one way I could do that. Now it also seems very light, but that's only because we've put in so much dark. Because believe me, we have a long way to go before we get to white. We're barely at a light middle tone at this point. But you can see, look at that. See how that just starts to, it's starting to enhance some contrast. It's giving us some shape here. We're able to pick out more elements of the fur here. And that's given this guy an entirely different look. He almost looks a little bit like a wolf. But it's still, when you see them all together, they'll look different, but they all sort of look vaguely brown. Different shades of brown. And I'm also going to give him the light eyebrows there, like you do sometimes. So here we go. Gonna keep working this stuff. Check that out. Gonna just take the fur here, work my way down. Now, I think the other reason I wanted to show something like this is that most of the when it comes to, say, army painting things that I show you on the workbench stuff tends to be a lot of the guys with very, very similar colors. This one's a bit of a twist for you. On this one, the colors are most definitely a little bit different. Actually, not a little bit different. In some ways, a lot different. And then I have to decide how far am I going to walk this lighter colored stuff up towards the mane. We'll throw a little bit more. But this is just like with the liner paints. I let the contrast paints, that initial wash of those things, kind of set the tone. Now let's move on to another one that's got a little different bit of a color. So we already messed with him a little bit. Let's go with this one. This one's sort of in between. Let's take whatever this is, and we're going to mix it with whatever this is. Now this is on the reddish side. And we're going to do something a little different here. We're going to maybe see if we make the bottom, as it gets towards the bottom, maybe a little bit more orange. And if I don't like it, I can just annihilate it with some darker contrast glazes over the top of it. And I can just use it essentially as a base. And here's where I'm using that feathered stroke. There's an awful lot of fur texture here. So you see, I'm taking the brush on its side. Still not a dry brush though, because, yeah, not a dry brush. It's because of the brush that I'm using. It's a filbert. It's basically a filbert brush right now, only a really soft filbert brush. Really, really soft. Now I'm going to actually take a little bit of that there. We're going to go with some of this, some of the white here. And actually I'm going to take some of the, that's that Iandin sort of yellowish there. And we're just going to go in here and see what happens. And then what I might do over the top of this, because actually I wanted to show you this where you work back and forth, because we haven't really done that yet. We sort of did on the bases maybe a little bit, but I wanted to go in depth with that. Like that. So this one, the idea here is to make it a calico boar, just with a few different type of color themes to them. Some that are warmer, some that are darker, some that are more cool. And that other one that's got more orange in him, well, he gets darker as he gets down towards the legs. So this is, again, another difference we're trying to find. We're trying to make him lighter as you work your way down towards his hooves and such, but in a much warmer color. The other one definitely more wolf-like, more grayish. I don't know if this one's almost a little bit more fox or coyote-ish or something like that. And all the while, just thinking, okay, so these two, the mains are lighter. So let's get a little bit of this lighter color on the mane here, like that. And who knows, maybe I just say, I don't like the way that is, and I'm just going to change it. Or maybe the person says, yeah, no, don't do that. Can you make that darker? Oh, believe me, that's, well, when you're working with game companies, that's guaranteed to happen. I mean, that's just a given right there. They're going to say, well, yeah, because they're going to be looking at concept art, and that is concept art these days, mostly done digitally, which is great, except you're painting with physical paint and a brush on a 3D object, and an artist was working digitally with light on a flat surface with a backdrop. And you don't have a backdrop. And should the artist choose to do that thing where he puts that backlighting on them, that miniature that you did, you can try and use all these same essential colors that they did, and it's not going to look very similar. And there's not going to be a darn thing you can do about it. Not a darn thing. So we're just working our way through here. Now, again, I don't want this thing to be 20 hours long. So what I will probably do at this point here is just mess around with the colors on the other two, and then we'll get into some of the stuff on the mouth here. Actually, no, I'm going to do that right now so that it actually will have a chance to dry. So you can see the difference here between these two. Again, this one lighter towards the bottom, this one darker towards the bottom. So while we got it here in this last little bit, I believe this is that fleshed here is red here, and I'm just throwing it. Yeah, good. You can see a little bit off to the side, like that. And I'm going to take just a touch of the blue to make it a bit more purple. And then I'm just going to, in these areas here, there's nothing I can do except just cover over the tusks and just shoot that down into his mouth. Nothing else I can do. And I think there's a couple that have the whole open mouth thing going on, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to shove that down in there. I can paint the teeth back in later. I am not going to worry about that. I can paint the tusks back in, all that kind of stuff. There we go. I think there's one last over here, this guy. But while I've got this stuff out, I am going to mix it with some of that, and I'm going to be coming really close to calling that screaming skull from now on. But whatever this is right here, we're going to actually make a little bit of a pink here. And this is one thing that I've done on all of the critters as part of this army, is they've had pink interiors in their ears. So this is, again, another case of mixing the lighter color in with the contrast paint, and I can really see it on that one right there. I'm sorry, and it's probably going to show up here. Sorry about the coughing. I've no idea what the heck's going on. One more time. And see, once that dries, I can even use the same pink mix now inside the mouth and everything else. So what we'll do is we'll come back here, and we're going to actually then work on things like the tusks and stuff in here, some of the teeth, try and put some eyes on them too. So we'll be right back with that. So we're going to work on some more of the finer things, I guess. We're going to take some of that very light color here. We're going to start to work in our teeth a little bit, and you can see just by virtue of letting that stuff sit in the darks there, that functions pretty well. Now we're going to go back in with darker stuff on the eyes there. I think I went with a standard round pupil. I didn't go with a slit or anything like that. And all we're doing, because we had that darker tooth color already, just by putting this lighter color over the top, it's already given us some decent shading / separation. We still can go with white in here too, or even the maiden flesh, which might be slightly lighter. Could be wrong about that, but I think it might. Alright, gotta get this other eye in there. And each of these, their eyes are a little bit different, faces a little bit different. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. I'm just kind of absent-mindedly actually using the medium. I just want to see, well, how does it work in regular paints? Because what we've heard, and I think we've even seen it, you can take the medium and make a regular paint like a contrast paint. Well, I mean, we kind of were already doing that. So I would say, yeah. I mean, we sort of started doing that from the get-go almost. But that is something we'll experiment with in a more controlled way, I guess, so that it is more verifiable instead of just, well, it looks like it. So I think something, because like I said here, these I have to get these done and out of the way. I will probably do that maybe on a live session, actually, because those are also supposed to be very experimental. And actually, I think I will, because I was going to work on, I think, the cave dwellers, because I don't know how to phrase it this way, but there's really none of the contrast paints by themselves that really would do what I'd want for those guys. So, yeah, I think I'm going to see here, I just sort of, the white, or that lighter color that I put in there, I went in a place I didn't want. We're taking some of I'm just going to keep calling it skull white, whatever, screaming skull. And I'm just trying to find a few lighter areas in here, that's all. So just like everything else, I say, well, I'm working on this. And then you see me working somewhere else. Well, that's the army painting thing. You see a color and you go, oh, yeah, you know what? I think I could use this over here. And you just paint it there because it can ultimately save you some time. That's the whole idea behind that. You've got to find time savings where you can. So we've kind of been making our own contrast paints from the very first time I touched these things. I started doing that, but I wanted to do it more like, I don't want to say in the sense that they tell you to do it, where it's just you just take, well, say that screaming skull and mix it with a medium, and what the heck happens? Well, there's a lot of these flesh tones that I've got here, just regular non-contrast paint flesh tones, and those cave dwellers. Gosh, do I have them over here? Yeah, here we go. So you can see it's mostly just skin tone. I want to see, well, hey, can I make a contrast paint out of something like this? I mean, that's clearly got a lot of white in it. It's much lighter. That could be really interesting if you could. So why not give it a shot? And it's working pretty well with this screaming skull color, because it's not, it actually, it sort of acts like a little bit of a flow improver, which starts to then lead me to think, would the flow improver do pretty much the same thing at a much smaller cost? Maybe, maybe not. Alright, can you see? Yeah, I think you can. And I know people have asked on the YouTube lives ever since those came out, well, are you going to use this from now on? Does this make your army painting faster? This, that, and the other. The only thing that really makes the army painting faster to the degree where I would use it 100% of the time on all my army stuff is the oils. Because it doesn't get any faster than that. I mean, that is exponentially faster than anything else I could possibly use in acrylics. The downside is to maximize that effect, to really get the fullest benefit out of it. It means for a solid month, that's all you're using is just the oils. You don't kind of march back and forth between the two. And believe it or not, this whole contrast paint phase here, this was supposed to be oil painting. That was, I had it all lined up. I had all the miniatures set up. They were even on the little holders like this. Everything was set up, ready to go. And then all of a sudden, this contrast stuff came along. And it became paramount to do something with them, because there's no way I can answer somebody's question if I've never tried them. How can I say anything about it? Well, there's plenty of folks that do. There are plenty of folks willing to offer all kinds of opinions about stuff they've never tried, never even seen, but they heard something. And that is, I don't know. The rumor mills have been around since people could talk, so I am not going to be blaming the whole social media thing on that. It is what it is. So one last to go here, and this one's going to be tricky for the eyes because they are completely blocked by these tusks. So I don't even know if you'll be able to see it when I do mess around with the eyes here. I will try to get it where you can see them. And this one especially is just in a really weird place. The mouth on that is just really different than some of the others. Alright. So we got that now. And while I have the lighter color here, I am going to find a little touch of my bluish stuff over here. I'm going to go back to maybe lightening up his fur in some of these. Okay, as we get further down. So see, to keep that, to get that away from that bone color, just mixing in a little bit of this blue here, ever so slightly, with the rest of my other colors here. Let's see. Okay, now it's back where you can see them. Like you do here. And I don't want this to get too light, because he's not a wolf, he is a boar. That sounds weird out of context. Hopefully this is not boring, because the folks that are used to the army painting stuff, you see me working for sometimes 45 minutes at a time, just kind of going through one phase of an entire unit. And the Song of Ice and Fire units, well, there's gonna be 12 guys in each one, so that is why those take 5 episodes and usually 12.5 to 13 hours. I was a little bit bummed because I was going to do a Mountains Man unit in oils for the next army painting series. But like I said, this came up and it pretty much took the schedule and went, it just blew that right out of the water. Which is yet another aspect of army painting, is all these folks, oh, but at least you get to make your own schedule. That is, there's the truth, and then there's farther from the truth. And if the truth was on Venus, farther from the truth is in another galaxy, because you do not get to make your own time. It's things come in, things can change on a dime. This entire month, I had a whole thing planned out, painting-wise, what I was going to do, what I was going to show. Everything that I had prepped had to just kind of go back into a shelf. All of it did. It all changed because something in the industry just changed. Now I could, I suppose, ignore it. That wouldn't be terribly helpful for you guys. And believe me, the amount of questions that I have been asked, both in person and on Facebook, and just questions on the YouTube videos themselves. I'm really glad I did this. Now I'm just making things darker here. Now here in the teeth, what I'm going to do is take the contrast paint here, using the medium to thin that stuff down. I'm going to try and get in between some of these teeth here. See if we can't do that. Just trying to get a little bit there in between some of those teeth. They're obviously sort of sculpted in a little different way. It's not really the way, say, a normal jaw would work, because, well, it is fantasy stuff after all. And that is the fleshed here red, which I guess that's appropriate. And sometimes I'll have to go back in and repaint some of the lighter colors. It's not unusual. Certainly not unusual. Now, let's see if I can make and something that's like a liner paint out of these contrast paints here. I don't know how this is going to work. Again, normally I would grab the brown liner paint or something like that to do things like the eyes. The one thing I do notice is that the contrast paints, you can't do like what you would do with the liners, where you would, again, I don't even like to use the word line, but they kind of have a little bit of thickness to them that the liner paints don't have. So I don't even know if you can see that eye that I just put in there, but it's there. And now I am going to take my dark brown here and mix it with that kind of almost later blue mix here, and then we're going to do these hooves. You can see they're almost more along the lines of the color of the rocks. See, it's a little bit of a bluish gray there. But it's all that sort of semi-translucency going on. Let's do that on this guy, because we really don't want orange hooves. So now hooves have a little bit of that bluish gray look to them, and we've got a whole bunch of space to get lighter with those. They look light, but that's just because we've so adequately positioned darks as many places as we could. And now, speaking of changing some things here, this is what we're gonna do. So this is some of that, effectively a bluish brown. And look at what we do. We are now going over the top of all of that orange color, that rust color orange, with what we just did, like a dark hoof color. But now, see, that's going to shift this. Look what I just did in the shadow there. See that bluish color in the shadow? Well, it's something I would do anyways with the Reaper paints, or even with the Grain Stuff World Intensity inks. It gives another layer of depth to the color, because we got a lot of warm stuff going on. Now we just threw in this nice cool color here. I suppose if you want the best direct comparison, go to the Shaggy Dog and the Ghost. Yeah, it was Shaggy Dog and Ghost. I think I actually have. I'm not going to bother going to grab Shaggy Dog. But those tutorials are out there. You should be able to find those. Again, if you're looking for something on the YouTube channel, I know people are asking for tagging and this, that, and the other. When I need to find a video of my own, I'll go Sky Earth Non-Metallic. I'll just type in that keyword. And guess what? It shows up, because I have keywords. So if you're looking for basing techniques, just go to the YouTube channel, type in basing techniques. Any video that I've got that has basing techniques in it, you'll see it. It'll pop up. So I'm glad. I want to throw that out there too. So here we're gonna go with that's that wildwood stuff, where we're just trying to make an eye here. So trying to get that upper lid there, right? And boy, this really doesn't act like the brown liner paint, but it's just gonna have to work. So there's our little eye. See, he's kind of looking forward there, looking kind of angry. It's because somebody took his truffles. I just said that. Let's see if I can't get the eye right in here. Trying to put my dot right over here. There's just less stuff in the way. There we go. That's where we wanted it to be. And now I'm gonna Take some medium and the wildwood here. This is where I was talking about going back and forth in a few places here. So we're sort of enhancing that demarcation line between the fur and that mane. And I'm going to double down here a little bit on my sort of grayish color here. Put even more of that on the chest. Put even more of it on the face. I have no idea why. I just think that that is something that's interesting. Because we've got so much orange on there already. And some of the other ones where it's cooler, as far as the fur in general, the muzzle is actually kind of on the orange side, so why not reverse it? We almost give them sort of a white face. I'm just trying to think of the animal where it's the face is sort of white, but the rest is kind of dark. Yeah, never mind. Never mind. It's very late, and when it gets to be this late and fatigue sets in this much, sometimes things come to mind. Alright, so actually I'm going to go one step lighter with that because it's different than the other ones. Certainly different than the other ones. And that's what we're looking for here. Oh, hyenas! That's it! That's it, because they kind of have those, sometimes they have those really weird light faces. And then sometimes they're the opposite. They'll have the really dark faces, but the bodies are lighter. I could be wrong. But yeah, so I'm just thinking of, see, that's just different to me. It's a really different look there for our boars. All right, let's do another set of eyes. Right, again, I'm just using the wildwood here, like so. And I'm gonna do the same thing on the hooves there, is get some of that bluish gray on the hooves. All right, here we go. Where's that bluish gray? There we go. Because his hooves are tan. It's essentially the same color as the rest of them. Well, that's not going to work. And we're going to change that real fast. We're not going to screw around. Just going to get in there and change that. And do something a little different here. Sorry. So I'm going to take some of this. That must be the Fire Slayer flesh. And now here we haven't put any medium in it. There's no regular paint in this mix. It's just going right over the top. Because I'm sure this was looking like a big old solid mass. Well, I knew that this was something I wanted to try over the top of it. And that is very fun. So all of these things, it's designed to do a few things. It's designed to test things. Again, in as real world a situation as possible. Because I want to know what this stuff can do as quickly as possible. Because I think we talk about this maybe a lot with our friends at conventions and stuff. We see a lot of painters, and they're painters that are doing well, and they find something, and something just works really well for them, and that's fantastic. But then they just kind of stay there, and the experimentation ends because they have made it. They have found whatever it was they were looking for, and the advancement kind of stops. And then they start to get kind of burned out because the interest level starts to wane because you are now just doing the same thing over and over and over again. There's other stuff that I'm going to be playing around with. The green stuff world metallics. So I want to use these with the green stuff world metallics, because what if now those green stuff world metallics already have tons of colors, but what if you combine them with these? What if you, instead of just washing these over the top, which I've seen, I mean, how many times have I already seen people taking the contrast paints and washing them over metallics? A bunch. And it looks really neat, but what I want to know is what happens if you mix the two together like what we've been doing here. So see, now we get some reddish, really nice deep reddish stuff going on in here. I think we got one more of these to try and do some eyes on. And what I'm going to do then is move on to even some more smaller details here. That whatever shading might still need to be done on the tusks, whatever final darks need to be done. Now, I might throw the foliage on one too in one last segment just so you see how that works. It's certainly not anything complex. And I'll do some pink in the ears, and we'll do some more fun stuff. One last thing I want to get to here is this, again, doing that bluish gray on the hooves here. So just mixing that up. Now the hooves, I want those to be somewhat darker on this guy because his legs are a little bit lighter. A little bit lighter. Then take some of that same bluish gray and look at what we're doing here. Again, sorry, don't know what's going on with my voice tonight. But that's just ever so slight. It's only there. That's it. Kind of like a silverback, you know, the gorillas or whatever. We're combining a lot of species here. But look at what that does. We're using the original contrast thing as a base, as an underlayment. It's an undercoating there. But see what happens over the top. An entirely different look to this, giving it that sort of bluish gray. And it's not gonna look just brown anymore. It's gonna have just a touch more life to it. We're not completely wiping out the brown. We're just adding to it a little bit. And I can't overestimate or overemphasize just how crucial it is to throw in these little surprises like this. These little shifts in color here and there. I know it seems a little scary sometimes. And maybe it takes a little while to, as far as the theory behind it. Okay, well, why are you putting this cool over the top of a warm, and why'd you do it vice versa elsewhere? That's kind of a by doing, because that's how it was for me. Because I was having a heck of a time, even in art school, understanding a few things like that, and I just had to keep hacking away at it and keep trying until eventually I went, aha, okay, that's it. Alright, so just a few touches there. So we'll be right back. Like I said, I'm going to go in here with some pinks, do some stuff on their noses there, other little final highlights, detail, and then maybe one last segment where we try and do some foliage. So we'll be right back with that. Let's play around with some more little fun details here. Let's just get some of this screaming skull back out here somewhere on the palette. let's see what kind of interesting pinks that we can make here. I'm gonna move that aside. So I'm sorry there's not a whole lot of nice clean areas here to fool around with that. I'm gonna shift this upwards here, and I'm gonna put that over here, and this is the, oh gosh, what's that called there? The Blood Angels red. Yeah, that's making that's a much warmer pink right there. Oh yeah, definitely a much warmer pink. And we are gonna drop that into the ears here. Maybe even onto the tongue. Not sure if you can see it, but it's there. And I am going to try and get some of this. Can you see that? Onto his gums here. Maybe even onto the bottom end of the tusk. The tusks are a little unusual, the way this thing kind of works out here. Let's see, let's go back to our pink again here. Gotta get the other ear. Where are we at? And as I said, we're just trying to match the previous figures, trying to get the rest of the army to match. This is all part of one gigantic, years-long project. And by years, technically, some of this goes all the way back to 2004, I want to say. So, yeah, 15-year project. That's another thing that I try to emphasize for folks here that want to get into the army painting. What are your goals? What is it that you want the army painting to be? Do you want to make your hobby your job? Because you darn well better ask yourself that before you get into this. Because for me, art's always been my job. It's just happens to also be the thing that I sort of do for fun too. But many, many, many people cannot work that way. That is not how their brain is geared. So you might want to ask yourself, is this something that, and now see I'm putting some of this pink here on the tongue. Again, we've sort of made our own semi-opaque contrast paint. And just trying to slap a little bit of the same pink color in a few other places. Maybe even by the eye here. Why? Just to do something that's a little different. Let's actually put some of this maybe even... Let's see if we can't find a place on the muzzle to put this. I think I've got it where you can see it. Sorry, there's just all kinds of reflections on the screen for me right now, because I had to use the brighter light to be able to see this. So that's kind of fun, and we're gonna go one more. I'm gonna hit this one more time with a lighter version of the pink too. Because that's essentially how everything was done on previous things. That inside of the ear was done very pink, and sometimes the person's really gonna want things to match. I've had other people that just whatever, doesn't matter, whatever you want. And then I've had it the other way, where it must absolutely match, and nothing less will do. That's why, for those of you that maybe have followed the blog, you saw those snow bases where instead of using any kind of snow flock or whatever, I have to actually just paint the snow on the base. It's entirely just paint it on. So I just added some little highlights there because the nose already had a little bit of redishness to it. I'm not going to do this on every single one. I'm doing it on him. The other ones might get a more of a standard sort of grayishness on the snout there. This one's going to have more of a brownish flavor going on with the snout instead. And let's get that a little brighter there. And then as one of the last things that I'm going to do here, I will just grab some of the Reaper pure white. I mean, pure white is pure white. I don't care who makes it. White is just white. And that's what we'll just do. Find a few of those really, really bright highlights in places. Especially maybe even on the teeth and such. Alright, here we go. So this is the last one we'll mess around with the pink. Now he's going to get some more pink on his snout also, just because we've done that in a few other areas on him. So here, see, I'm making the gum line lighter, and on some of the other ones I've made the gum line darker. These are the interesting, subtle little ways that you can find differences here and there. Alright, so that works there. I'm really glad I did do that sort of white or coolish light face thing going on there. That's neat. So here we go. This is just, it's white. And I need to put it out here because I do not have a GW straight up white, because I use it so seldom. It's just, I see absolutely no need in buying it whatsoever. Now, on our tusks here, that's going to, yeah, it's going to bring out a few things. See, even a few places, a few accents here, especially around the eyes. The face in general, but really you want to focus in on those eyes whenever possible. So here we're just starting to see that's a bit of a broken line right there, and we're gonna do some of that here, so it's again starts to emphasize getting you looking at the eyes. And maybe even just a few indications of fur there. Who knows, maybe we even get a few touches of this on the mane. I don't want to make it look like he's on fire, so that's why I've been sort of toning down some of the oranginess to the mane. But that's certainly going to have him looking different than the rest. And even there on, say, the hooves, we find a few areas there that we can maybe drop a highlight on. And what the heck, I might even do something like this in just a few subtle places to sort of carry what happened with the face. We'll just carry a touch of that back here. Not a lot. Definitely not a lot. As little as possible, in fact. So there's him. Let's move on. Next guy. And there we go. Once again, just trying to find some places to get some emphasis here. This whole area is much more wide open than some of the other ones. So we try and show some more stuff inside the mouth here. And like I said, just maybe here on the hooves, give a little sense of that they're not fur textured, that there might be a slight bit of shininess there, and we might put a little bit of texture here too. It is always weird painting the tree branches and that sort of thing to make them look like trees. But it can still be fun. So I'm just enjoying putting these little touches of that light there. It just kind of gives it that extra little bit of sparkle. Now I am going to go back to my bluish gray. It's the same stuff that I was using on the hooves. And we'll get some of that on the snout here. So again, it sort of makes it look wetter, effectively. And we need to get a couple of those lighter touches there, and I'm going to go back in with my lighter bluish gray there. Like I said, we're going to move along one to the next here. Now this one, I am going to get some lighter stuff going on up here too. And the snout also needs some development there. And that's where we're going to go back to our bluish gray. Do some of that. Once again, putting that down in some of the shadows there. And this is where we're almost working opposite here. So in the shadow areas of the eyes, we're actually kind of putting a bit of a lighter color in there. I know that sounds really strange, but it does have a neat effect. Here we go. More of this on the hooves there. So I've got some other things. I got some really unusual stuff planned for these contrast paints. Stuff that, well, nobody's used them on a bust yet. Then I've got busts here to paint. I've also got it's going to serve basically as the Nocturna figure. I've already started working on that. It's actually a Black Sun 75mm figure. Because, hey, we'll break the rules again. Wait a minute, you're using contrast paints on busts and 75mm. You can't do that. Well, I have a few colorful metaphors that I could use that I won't really use. I try to keep this as G-rated as possible because I do know that there are some folks that actually use this for their kids, and by kids I mean really young kids, and they just kind of use it to hypnotize them. And if there's too many colorful metaphors, then it becomes less babysitting and a little more, educational. Just adding a little bit of the white and just a couple of key places here. And I mean a couple. Just trying to keep that as minimal as possible. And I think I just got a couple of these tusks here to do. Yeah, and then we'll just, I'm gonna try and get a few right around his eyes, around these ears. Alright, and I really don't want to have to do a separate segment because this is just so darn simple. Alright, that's going to be good for colors on all this stuff here. Let's just mess with some foliage here, and it's really simple. I'm going to get this glove off so I can feel what I'm doing. Now these are, I think these are from Green Stuff World right here. I like these. They're shrub tufts. This is something in one of the basing videos I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how to make these yourself. Right? So we got super glue here. And we are just going to go like that. Ah, good. I got one of my pins. Like so here. Take one of these. Zoink. Put that right there. Poof. Acts as a nice little color contrast as well. I'm not going to put another one out here yet. However, I am going to get this palette out of the way before something unforeseen happens. So we're going to throw you over there. And what about this guy? Well, without a doubt, I want one there. I sort of half intentionally put little gaps there like that for just such a boom thing like that, because now it looks like some foliage growing right there out of the cracks in the rocks. Just got to spread those around a little bit. Looks nice and natural. Oh look, there's a space for the other piece here that I ripped off of that. So I just got to get that attached to my pin. I'm going to shove that sucker down in there. Looks like leaves growing out of there. Now I could do the whole Green Stuff World cut leaf thing on this too, but much as I would like to, that's not what the rest of the army has. So we do as we do, and we match things. And sometimes that means maybe sacrificing a little bit of your artiste sense there and just doing the best you can with what's available. I just want to put a smaller one here. Let's see if I can find... here's a small one. Just get that stuck on there. Bam. Just like that. Now, one other little strategic thing here, and I found this with snow. If I do something like this, I can only put one pin here. He's less likely to spin around now because there's just something holding him there, and I'm going to do the same thing right there. So this tuft of shrub right here is going to actually act as a little bit of a roadblock to keep him from moving around. There you go. Now I'm going to want another one somewhere. I'm going to put one down here. Let's see if I can't find another one of these small ones. There's one. Would have loved to put flowers on these, but once again, flowers were not part of the choices. So there we go. And now before we get too deep into anything else, so I'm going to bring these back out. So you can see there's other stuff here. Now we got a couple of things. This is literally just a bunch of refuse here from other terrain projects and such. I'm going to get some of the pieces of foam out of there and pieces of tree. But that's a whole, there's even like a flower tuft in there. But I have, a lot of times I have these little things of refuse. But then we also have some, and then we use this on the Army Painting Series 9 right here. So we're going to have some of this stuff out. And I've got a different type of super glue that I'm really hoping cooperates, and it looks like it's going to. So I'm going to test this out first. Good. So this is much thinner. This is that cheap, nasty kind of super glue, but it serves a function. So see, it's thin. It kind of moves around. I can take, see that little clump of foliage there, and now I dust over some of that. So this is why, see, with all that reddishness there, it acts as a little contrast to the green, but we're keeping enough of our base that we painted intact, so we're not wiping that out. And I'm certainly going to get some down here and over here, and I like to actually attach my foliage pieces. See, I walked up this green foliage up to here, so now my tuft doesn't look just isolated. Like, oh look, somehow miraculously in this one small area, vegetation grew. How wonderful. Well, now this is where we try to think about those things. I don't know, you can't make these look completely realistic because the critter that's on them is obviously not very realistic. You do what you can. You find realism where possible. So this one here, I'm gonna see if I can't get some of these clumps here shoved down in that little area right there, and down in here I've got another little clump that I'm gonna try and just shove down in there like that. It starts to make it look a little bit overgrown. Now, I think I usually end up with less of a green thumb than I used to, but oh my gosh, I'd end up with this stuff all over me. Oh my gosh. And my entire hand would just have this flock stuff stuck to it. I think we got one more to do here. So let's see, what are we gonna throw here? I'm gonna see if I can't get some of these clumps of stuff in here. There's even bits of moss. So if you're wondering where that stuff came from, that's actually from when I was making my trees. Now, is the blog? Yeah, see that Wappelius blogspot.com. If you want to see terrain, there are hundreds of articles there showing how I make trees and mountains and waterfalls and all kinds of crazy stuff. And you say, well, I'm not interested in terrain. Well, do you have to make a large base for a big critter, or do you want to do a diorama? Well, guess what? Terrain is essentially a well, it's either a playable or it's almost like a little vignette. But it's something that's meant for obviously playing a game on. So look at that. That is, I got all kinds of fun stuff going on there. My last thing I want to do is play Connect the Tuft. Oh yeah, that's a new saying. I just made a new saying. Let's play Connect the Tuft. It's a new game show. Well, hopefully, speaking of games, these will be enjoyed in whatever games they are played in. And hopefully this info was useful to you. Now, if you want to get on the army painting stuff, that's going across the page right now. It's $15 a month, and when you pledge, you get all the previous series. And like I said, I think it can help you. It plays off of all the other stuff, all the Dark Sword tutorials, all the other stuff you see in the one-offs. It kind of becomes combined into one cohesive thing where we're just doing a whole unit. So thanks again for watching. You want to click the like, do the subscribe thing, then you'll know when I'm going to do those YouTube live sessions. But until next time, I will see you later, and thanks a lot.